27 people, one shallow lakeshore. Around 10,000 years ago, they were clubbed, stabbed, and left in the mud where they dropped. At least one of them was a woman about to give birth. Some of the dead still had their hands bound behind their backs. Archaeologists call the site Nataruk, in what is now northern Kenya. The bones were studied by Marta Mirazan-Lar and her team at Cambridge, and what they found may be the oldest clear snapshot of one group of humans deliberately wiping out another. And you have felt a faint echo of whatever put them there, the flash of heat when a stranger shoves past you on a crowded train, that instant, wordless sense that someone is one of them and not one of us. That reflex is ancient, older than farming, older than cities, maybe older than our species itself. But the question that actually matters isn't whether ancient humans killed each other. They clearly did. The real question is when it started, because the answer rewrites what you think human nature even means. And it is not the answer most people expect. So walk back to that lakeshore. 10,000 years ago, this place was green, a lagoon on the edge of a much larger lake, thick with fish and birds. A good place to live. Good enough that a small band of hunter-gatherers had made camp there, with children, with elders, with that pregnant woman. Then, another group arrived, and they did not come to trade. We know how it ended because the wounds are still readable in the bone. Arrow and spear points made of obsidian, a black volcanic glass you cannot even find nearby, still lodged in skulls and chests, crushed cheekbones, shattered hands, raised too late to block a blow. These people were not buried. They were left exactly where the violence found them. Here is what makes Nataruk so unsettling. These were not farmers fighting over a fence. They owned almost nothing. They carried their entire lives on their backs. So why would anyone bother to slaughter a whole band that had nothing to steal? To answer that, we have to go back much further than 10,000 years, because the roots of this may not even be human. In 1974, in Tanzania, the researcher Jane Goodall watched something she said disturbed her for the rest of her life. A group of chimpanzees, animals she knew by name, began hunting down and killing the members of a neighboring group they had once lived peacefully beside. It went on for years. Today, scientists call it the Gombe Chimpanzee War, and it was not a freak event. Decades later, researchers like John Matani spent years watching a huge chimp community at Ngogo in Uganda. They saw the same pattern. Small parties of males slipping to the edge of their territory, moving in total silence, ambushing lone rivals one by one. Over a decade, that community killed enough neighbors to seize their land. Sit with that for a second. Coordinated raids, targeting outsiders, taking territory, in animals that share almost 98% of your DNA. The primatologist Richard Wrangham argues this points to something deep and old, that the machinery for lethal us versus them raiding was already running in the ancestor we share with chimps, millions of years before any human picked up a spear. In this view, Nataruk is not a beginning, it is an inheritance. And there may be an even older human wound. At a site in Sudan called Jebel Sahaba, first excavated by the archaeologist Fred Wendorf, a cemetery holds bodies that may be 13,000 years old, many of them scarred by weapons. A recent restudy, led by Isabel Crevecoeur, found something grim. Many of these people had been hurt violently, then healed, then hurt again. This was not one terrible day. This was a way of life. So it is settled, right? Humans have always been at war. It is simply in the blood. Not so fast, because this is where the whole story turns. For the vast majority of human existence, across hundreds of thousands of years, we find almost none of this. No mass graves, no walls built for defense, no cemeteries full of arrow wounds. For most of the Stone Age, the record of organized human warfare is strangely, stubbornly empty. And that points to a very different idea. The anthropologist Douglas Fry argues that large-scale war is not some ancient default setting at all, that for most of our past, humans lived in small, mobile bands, where the smarter move almost every time was to avoid a fight, not pick one. Think about why. When you own nothing and carry everything and the group threatening you is just over the ridge, you do not need to win. You just need to leave. You can walk away. There is always more land, more lake, more horizon. Fighting is expensive. Dying is forever. For a nomad, running is genius. So here is the twist that flips this entire story. The problem may never have been that humans became violent. The problem was that we stopped being able to walk away. Here is the truth most people get exactly backwards. War is not written in your blood. It is written in your walls. Because somewhere in the last 12,000 years, people began to settle down. They planted crops, they stored grain in pits, they built the first villages, and for the first time in the human story, you owned something you could not carry, and something worth stealing. Suddenly, walking away meant abandoning everything you had, your food, your land, your future. The old escape hatch slammed shut, and that ancient us versus them switch got trapped in a world with no exit. The evidence lands right on cue. At Talheim in Germany, about 7,000 years ago, dozens of early farmers, men, women, and children, were killed with stone axes and thrown into a single pit. And Otzi, the famous frozen Iceman from the Alps, over 5,000 years old, did not die of the cold. He died with an arrowhead buried in his shoulder and a defensive wound on his hand, running from someone. If you want to understand the other Stone Age instincts still quietly steering your modern life, subscribe to Neanderthink. And that switch never left you. You are carrying it right now. You feel it the moment a car cuts you off and your whole body floods with rage at a person you will never meet. You feel it when two strangers online over nothing become bitter enemies in a single afternoon. You feel it in the roar of a stadium, in the way a jersey color can turn a calm crowd into one snarling animal. Psychologists have measured just how little it takes to trip this wire. In the 1970s, Henri Tajfel ran a now famous set of experiments. He split total strangers into two groups based on something meaningless, like a coin flip or a preference for one painter over another. No history, no conflict, nothing at stake. And almost instantly, people began favoring their own group and shortchanging the other. Your brain will build an us and a them out of nothing at all, in seconds. That is the machinery of Nataruk, still humming inside your skull. Except it was tuned for a world of maybe 150 people you would know your whole life. And now it runs in a world of 8 billion strangers, sorted into 1,000 tribes by the screen in your pocket. But here is the part that should give you hope, and it is the reason this story does not end in despair. That line between us and them is not fixed. It is a dial, and you are the one holding it. Because the same wiring that lets us turn on outsiders is exactly what makes humans the most cooperative animal that has ever lived. No other creature builds cities of millions of strangers who mostly do not kill each other. We manage that by constantly redrawing the circle of us, pulling more and more people inside it. The psychologist Steven Pinker has argued, though not without pushback, that as that circle widened across history, from band to tribe to nation, towards something like all of humanity, the rate of violent death actually fell. So the ancient switch is real. But who counts as us was never carved in stone. It is learned, which means it can be stretched and widened by you in the small daily choice of whether the next stranger who annoys you is a threat or just a person. 27 people once died on a lakeshore because another group looked at them and saw only them. The switch that killed them is the same one buzzing in you when someone cuts in line. The difference is that you get to decide how far your circle reaches. They never knew they had a choice. You do. And if you want to know why that same brain also makes you ache to belong to a group so badly it can run your whole life, that is a story for the next video.